Welcome. Today we're going to take a look at cutting out subjects and removing backgrounds in Photopea or RemoveBG. These are alternatives to Photoshop, and we're going to get accustomed to using a free tool if you do not have the ability to have Photoshop at home. Just to go over, we do have photopea.com, PEA, and then remove.bg. If I go over to remove.bg, nice welcome screen gives you a little sample. You have a picture of a subject, and it removes the background very quickly. We'll take a look at that and see how it will modify our image momentarily. But I have provided 6 images, and we're going to look to download each of these. I can right click on the image and hit open image in new tab. It'll automatically download, opening up a tab and then going into your downloads. You're going to right click on each of these to download all 6. Eventually, we're going to put this into a slideshow presentation. The slideshow presentation goes over the difference between a JPEG, having a image with a background, like you see the example here, or having a transparent background, where the image becomes a lot more classy looking in a way that works with the presentation and doesn't become a distraction. And you see that there are several images below, all the 6 images that we're going to look to modify and see how we can cut them out to make them more interesting. But we're going to use a couple different tools, and again, Photopea is a free resource, a free web-based application. So understand that it does have its limitations. It's not going to be as strong as Photoshop, and a number of tools may say that they do not work without paying for a premier or premium fee. Do not pay for it. Take advantage of the tools that we have, and we'll work around what the limitations are. So when you do land on photopea.com, you may get to a home screen that says start using Photopea. Just click on the button and it'll bring you to this landing page. Once you get to this landing page, every time you come to it, you will get the same landing page. But now that I've downloaded the 6 images, we're going to go up to File, top left, go to Open, and I've sorted out my files. I'm using a Mac, but doesn't matter if you're using a PC or a Mac. Just understand I will give alternatives in the shortcut keys. That means using either the Command or Control. Command for a Mac, Control for a PC on your keyboard, or using Alt, ALT, or versus Option on a Mac. Alt is right next to the space bar. And I'll continue to break that down a little bit as we get into modifying out these images. I'm going to look to select out the apple. I can hold down Control on my keyboard to select out the other images. So I want jump, male portrait, pink hair, puppy, and umbrella. And we're not going to do all 6 of these in Photopea. We will take a look at the remove.bg momentarily. And we'll understand the limitations and the issues of using these programs versus using Photoshop. I'm going to click open, and these will take a second to load. And if it's easier, just work one photo at a time. You can see that it does progress a little bit slower, and this is a new computer, so it's just a matter of how fast these images load. So I would highly recommend just do one image at a time and you'll be quite fine. If I want to jump, you'll see that there are tabs along the top navigation showing me each of the files. I can click on each one, clicking on the different tabs. Just understand that if you accidentally click X, it will close out the image. But you should see 6 images going across. If, again, you want to make sure that the computer doesn't run too slow, open one image at a time. It will give you the capability to be able to do it well. But we're going to take a look first at jump. Right now, the image that I provided has this little white frame. It has a lot more detail when it comes to the subject matter, the girl itself. We're not looking to eliminate out everything. We're going to see how a couple tools will help modify out the image and turn it into something different. Over on the left side navigation, we'll start with what is known as the Move tool. First tool, left side navigation, looks like a little arrow. If you hover over top of the tool, it will show you what that tool does. So if I move my cursor over top, you can see Move tool. And if you see a little white arrow in the corner, which you see for most of all the tools, you see it doesn't appear on the stamp tool, but most of the tools have a little arrow in the bottom right corner. This represents that there are tools underneath of the tool itself. So if I click and hold on the tool, you'll notice that we have the move tool and artboard tool. Or if we go down below, we have what is known as the rectangle the rectangle select and the ellipse select. These are very similar to the tools of Photoshop, except they might change the name a little bit to something a little bit different just for copyright issues. In Photoshop, it's known as the rectangle selection tool. This is just known as rectangle select, or elliptical marquee tool. Instead, it's just known as ellipse select. So just understand that you can jump between any of the tools, clicking and holding, you can pick out the tool that you need. Polygon lasso tool is a common tool that we will use, or we can go with the standard lasso tool, which is a little bit more freeform. You can draw clicking and dragging with the mouse. If you don't have a mouse, you're using a touchpad, that's absolutely fine. Just understand it does take some getting used to on these programs. The fourth tool left side, if I click and hold, we have the option between what is known as the magic wand tool, the quick selection tool, and the object selection tool. And again, all three of these are going to be useful, but unfortunately they're not great when it comes into using on a free program like Photopea. There's some limitations and some restrictions in comparison to what Photoshop can do. So just please bear with us as we go through the couple of these tools, and we'll see how they all work together. To start out with, if I wanted to remove out the background, understand that images can be different based on what background they're referring to. If I'm looking at this image itself, we have a girl with a photo studio orange background and then this little white border. Photopea is going to recognize that the white border is the background, not the bright orange background itself. So please be aware that based on the image, it may not always be what you want. But if I wanted to remove out the background, I could either use the tools on the left side navigation, or I can take a look and see if maybe the select at the top navigation gives me another alternative. If I click and hold on select, we'll see that we have RemoveBG, meaning background. When I click on it, it's going to create what is known as a layer mask. Give it a moment, it's going to load, but I know that it's removed out the background because it went from a white border to what is known as a transparent border. Where it's transparent, we see these little gray and white boxes. So this represents the transparency. Understand, whenever you see these gray and white boxes, a transparency allows us to have images behind or show that there's nothing around the outside. But to really break this down a little bit or understand a couple of the tools, we're going to click on the move tool, first tool left side navigation. With the move tool, if I wanted to move this image now, you can see that I can click and drag this image around this transparent area, and it's kind of free to where I move it. If your computer's a little bit slow or glitchy, it's just an understanding that there are limitations when you're on a Chromebook or on a Mac or PC based on what you're using. But move tool is great for moving an object to where you want. The second tool, left side navigation, again, as we started with, we had the rectangle select and the ellipse select. If I wanted to use a combination of the ellipse select or rectangle select, I can look to start by clicking, dragging over an area. Let's say I'm just going to go to the top corner. And with this selection, I'm going to switch back over to the move tool. With the move tool, I can click and drag this selected area, and you'll notice that it's clicking and dragging over based on what is our layer mask. It's moving and allowing us to see that original white border that we removed earlier. It didn't go away, it's just representing that that is the visible area. If I wanted to take a look and just leave the orange background, we're going to make some modifications over in our layer panel. Our layer panel keeps us organized. So with this, we're going to look to click over on our background little black and white box. If I right click on this little box, we're going to apply the raster mask. If I were to disable the raster mask, it puts an X and we can see the original image. If I right click on it again, I can delete the layer mask and get rid of it completely. I want to undo what I just did, so using a shortcut key, I can either hit Control or Command Z to undo, or I can go up to Edit and Undo. But I'm going to right click instead. We're going to enable the layer mask so we can see what we have. And this time, what we're going to do is right click on that little black and white box and hit Apply. This will eliminate out the white background for good, and we're left with what we see. So this time, if I now draw over, say, the right corner, it doesn't have to be the same shape, just understanding how the tool works. Now that I've drawn over this area, I'm going to click back on the Move tool, and then click and drag this orange corner up. And you'll see that this time when we drag it up, it's not going to make sure that you have the background layer selected. But when I click and drag this area up, it now separates from the object, and now we don't see this little white background. It's because we applied the raster mask, eliminating out the white, and now we're left with this orange border. And I can switch the tool if I wanted to experiment. I can click and drag or click and hold and choose out the ellipse select. With ellipse select, it's a circle icon, and I can click and drag over a corner just so we can see the difference. I have to click on the Move tool so I can move the object to where I want, and you see it cuts out that rounded selection. And if I decided to apply inside of an object as well, just click and drag inside an area, you see that you get this dotted line of the selected area, and then I can click and drag this piece to wherever I want. Understand that we can get into also manipulating or transforming a object or subject based on the selection that we have. So if I wanted to do rectangle select or ellipse select, that's up to you. I'm going to just do the rectangle select. I'm going to draw a box around her head. With the selection around her head, I can either, yes, get into moving it, which moves the location of her face, or I can go up to Edit at the top navigation. Under Edit, I'm going to go down to Free Transform. You could also go to Transform as well, as it does give alternatives or a little bit more sense of the different tools that we have. But Free Transform allows us to get into scaling an object, making it bigger, or rotating an object. So if I wanted to make her head bigger, I can click and drag the corner of the object, and now we're playing with different proportions. If I wanted to rotate her head, I can move it left or right, and I just have to click and drag from around the outside corner. Understand that I'm not on the corner itself, I'm a little bit outside the object. Where if I'm on the corner or on the side, I can click and drag to scale up her head. But if I move my cursor outside, it allows it to rotate the shape. So you can start to kind of have fun and experiment with how this image can be manipulated. But once I'm satisfied with it, if I hit Enter or Return on my keyboard, it will set the change or modification I made to the face. And I still have this dotted line around the outside of the image, so I may want to consider deselecting. If I want to deselect, I can either go up to Select and Deselect, or you'll notice that there's a little shortcut key, says Command or Control D. If I hit Command or Control D on my keyboard, it will allow me to deselect the area, and it gets rid of that dotted line. So you can already see that we kind of have fun with experimenting how an image can be manipulated. We can also look at other ways of selecting out a shape. The third tool, left side navigation, we have the lasso tool. And with the lasso tool, it's more free form. It's based on how you click and drag around an area. Again, make sure that you do have the background layer selected. If you happen to see it not grayed out or not lighter gray, it means that the layer is not selected. But with the lasso tool, if I click and drag around an area, understand it is following the cursor or where my cursor is. So this can be very free form. If I don't like the selection, I can always go to a different area, click and drag into a different area to draw out a shape. And again, if I switch from the lasso tool to the move tool, I can click and drag the object that I've just drawn over and move it to wherever I want. But the difficult part about the lasso tool, it is based on the cursor, how you move and adjust. It's not the greatest, and it's very hard sometimes to get it accurate. So I would normally recommend use the polygonal lasso tool, as it goes clicking point by point. So when I would say click by point, if I click around the waist of my subject, I can move my cursor over to the side, click another point, and I can draw a selection around the area that I want to focus on. So around her bottom half. If I wanted to play with scaling or modifying, again, I can go up to Edit, Free Transform, and maybe I just want to play with the scale to make it bigger or make it smaller based on what I want to do with it. If I want to rotate it, just click and drag left or right. Allows us to get into more manipulation of the image. But once I'm satisfied with it, I can hit Enter to place it and hit Control or Command D to deselect. But we're just seeing how we can cut out and manipulate out an image. Once we now have this, we want to save this as what is known as a PNG. PNG is a portable network graphic, and we want to be able to maintain this transparency. If we save it as a JPEG, all this transparent area would fill in with white. So to save it as a PNG, you're going to go up to File, down to Export As, and you'll see PNG. When you click on PNG, it will download to your downloads folder. Just make sure to hit Save. And now it's added into my downloads. Once I have this image, I can take a look at the other tab. We're going to go over to our slideshow. And with our slideshow, I can go up to Insert and understand that you do need to make a copy. You cannot edit the original version I gave you. So please go up to File, make a copy, and entire presentation. I'm going to call mine sample. I recommend just put your name on it so I can identify your file. But keeping the transparent images, great. And now I'll go down to the third slide where we have the original image. I'm going to go to Insert, Image, and Upload from Computer. From here, I can choose out the new jump image, and I can tell the difference because this is a PNG versus the JPEGs we originally started with. And I can also see a sample of what it looks like. I'm going to click Open, and it will insert right over towards the right side of where my PNG file is. Once I have the PNG, just understand, we can see the whole image. It allows us to be able to visibly see the difference between the original versus now the cut up piece. Now we're going to take a look at the difference between a JPEG and a PNG with the Apple image. So we can go back over to Photopea. And if I am done with the Photoshop image, I can exit out and just close out that image. So for the Apple, if I wanted to get into cropping out or taking out this background, because there's no white border or additional area, it will recognize the black as the background. If I wanted to take a look, I can try going to Select and RemoveBG, and it does a great job of recognizing it, but it's not perfect. Understand that I can see that the top of my stem of the apple is a little bit cut out. So that is not always the best tool to use. So I'm going to just step back. I can always hit Control Z or Command Z. I'm just going to undo. I can go Edit Undo as well to put the black background in. Instead, what we're going to take a look at is the fourth tool, left side navigation. With the fourth tool, left side navigation, we're going to take a look at the three different options of cutting out the subject. We have Magic Wand, Quick Selection, and Object Selection. We're going to start with Object Selection, and with Object Selection, I'm going to click and drag over top of the whole apple image, making sure that I include all elements of the apple. This does a better job of recognizing the area, and we can see the dotted lines appearing around the apple, but it doesn't remove the background itself. To remove the background, we're going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel, and you'll see a little icon that will read Add Raster Mask. I can also go over to Layer at the top, go to Raster Mask, and then click Add. So when I click this, that did not get the selection I wanted, so excuse me on that. But instead, at the bottom of the layers panel, we're going to click on that little white square with a little black circle, and it will remove out the black background. And this does a better job of removing it compared to the subject select, or remove background at the top. But that's a very quick and easy way of doing this. If I wanted to save this or go to export it, we're going to take a look at the difference between a JPEG and a PNG. I'm going to go to File, Export As, and JPEG, and I just click Save. You'll notice that it had a white background on that little pop-up. While we're here, we're also going to go File, Export As, and this time as a PNG. This time we see the transparent background. We click Save. Now I'm going to go over to my sample, look to insert both these images one at a time. Image, or insert image, upload from computer. Now I'm going to choose out the JPEG version first. When I click on the JPEG version, you'll see that it places in, but it has this white transparent, or this white area around the outside. It didn't remove the background, it fills in with anything that's transparent, it will fill in with white. So we want to be careful not to save them as JPEGs. Instead, we're going to go over to Insert Image, Upload from Computer, and this time we're choosing out the PNG. You'll notice that there is no white background here, and it will insert with the transparent apple right where we want it. So we can see the difference. It just overall comes out as a stronger image because it works with the background that you're using for your presentations. But understand that if I do go back to Photoshop, if I just step back on what I did earlier, just to kind of reinforce, there are other ways of doing this. If I wanted to try a quick selection tool, I'm going to click on the quick selection tool, click and hold on the icon, and you see quick selection. And I'm going to deselect, Command or Control D to get rid of the dotted lines. Or go up to select and deselect. But with the quick selection tool, you are clicking and dragging inside the subject that you want and allowing Photopea to recognize the object. And it was just a quick selection, but it does a great job of selecting the area. And I would again look to do the same thing, go down to the bottom right corner, click on Add Raster Mask, and again it does a great job of recognizing and selecting out the area. Again, I can hit Command Z to undo, or undo on the top, and I'm going to deselect. The other method is using what is known as the magic wand. With the magic wand tool, it's a little bit different because with the magic wand, I'm not clicking on the apple. If I click on the apple, it's going to give me only selection of the color that we see. Different color ranges makes it difficult to be able to select out the entire apple. Instead, what we're going to do is click on the black background. And again, it does a great job of recognizing the area. The problem is that we currently have an inverted version of the selection we want. So if I were to hit the layer mask, it actually cuts out the apple. We don't want that. Instead, what we want to do is invert our selection. To invert our selection, we're going to go to Select and Inverse. Now it puts it around the apple. Now when I click on the apple mask, or layer mask, it removes out the white background, or the black background. So just understand there are significant tools that can help assist in doing what we're looking for. But now that I've removed out the background, we've learned the process and we put it into our presentation. Now we're going to move on to our umbrella. With the umbrella, it's a little bit more complicated because we have a more difficult background. But we're going to try now a different tool and see how it works. So Photopea we're not actually going to use for this. I don't have to save the work for the apple. I can just close. But the umbrella, if I take a look at this, we want to get the little details. And I can attempt to use the object selection, but it is very complicated in the overall image. There's little areas that just do not do a good job of selecting the overall subject. So I'm going to deselect. And if I want an attempt, I could try doing remove background and use it. There's a limitation on it, so just be careful. You don't want to pay for it. You don't want to have to pay for ads or anything like that. So just we work around what we have. This time instead, what we're going to do is go over to RemoveBG. When you get to RemoveBG, I can click on Upload File or Image. I can go over to my umbrella and I can click Open. It looks like it does a great job, but understand there are limitations. Number one, the size of the file. When we want to download, you'll see that you can either download at the resolution that we started with, or you have to download the free version, which is a lower quality. We are going to do this, and we get the umbrella now in there. I go over to my image, and we're going to insert this. Insert image, upload from computer. Choose out the image. And it looks all well and good. A couple areas that I do want you to recognize and see. If I'm looking at this, it did cut off the little white nubs at the bottom of the umbrella on the opening. You don't really notice it here because it is a smaller image, and most people will not notice the little details, but just understand there are restrictions and limitations. But the cool part is that you have a lot more control when you don't have a background that's restricting your overall image. I can't get into rotating this, but this one gives me the ability to make this a lot more interesting. And presenting wise, it comes out as a standout to make your information look better. Just like we see with the JPEG version of this image versus when it's cut out. Next we have our male subject here. We're going to take a look back over on Photopea. I don't need the umbrella, so I can close this image out, and we'll go over to our male portrait. The difficult part about this is looking at the little fine details, particularly of his hair, of his chin, or around his head. Even Photoshop has complications with this image, but we want to see how the image works overall. I can try going up to select at the top of navigation and remove background. If I wanted to watch an ad, I can click OK. Let it give it a second. It's going to make us watch an ad to be able to do the production. And it's still recognizing or analyzing the picture itself. So this may not be the best option to work with, but we can take a look at other tools and see if something else will work for us. I am going to refresh this page just to see, as again, there are issues when it comes into this. I go back up to File, Open, and understand if you do close out an image in Photopea, it will likely close out any of the work that you did. You have to save it as a Photoshop file if you do want to be able to manipulate it. I was closing out some tabs just to create a little bit more space on my computer. But back over to the male portrait, if I try to go up to select and remove BG,
your child is
So just understand that I'm stuck watching an ad to be able to take advantage of the free resources in Photopea. You may have to do it as well. But we also can't guarantee that it always works. So give me 3 more seconds. So taking a look at the image, it's processing. Does a very good job overall of selecting out the area. It is not perfect, but it is better than a lot of different tools. Even in Photoshop, you have to do a lot more cleanup than you do in Photopea here. So this works out great. I have the background removed. I can go back up to File, Export, and export as PNG. We'll keep it as the male portrait. But understand that if I do want to save this as a Photoshop file, I can maintain the transparency and add in or edit later on. What I would have to do is go to File, Save as PSD. PSD is saving it as a Photoshop file. So I can go to File, Save as PSD, and it saves as a Photoshop file in which I can open up later. But I'm going to close this out. I can click on the X. If I did want to open that up, as I said, I can go to File, Open, and I'm going to choose out the PSD file just so we can see that it does open. It provides us all the layers and be able to manipulate from where we last left off. But if you don't save it as a PSD file, you'll have to start from fresh. The same thing applies, but instead of doing the pink hair, we'll go back over to the RemoveBG and we'll look to choose out the pink hair girl and go upload image, choose the pink hair. And again, this does a great job of separating out the background. In Photoshop, there's a limitation where it's not picking up the strap of her shirt, but in RemoveBG, it does a great job. So we are going to download the preview. Now that we have both these images, we can then go up to Insert, Image, and Upload for Computer. I'll do the transparent male subject. Does a good job overall of the subject area. And then getting the pink hair, Insert, Image, and Upload for Computer. So both work, and it's just a matter of finding what works for you and what's going to be efficient for you overall. The last one we're going to take a look at is the puppy. And understand, yeah, I would love to tell you that it works every time, but RemoveBG doesn't get the puppy as well as it should because of the complicated background or the commonality of the background being close to the fur color. When I try to do this process, it doesn't end up perfect. It ends up cutting out some areas or leave some areas around. And that actually did a great job overall, but it gives a sharp edge that doesn't look natural. So I'm going to download this so we can just see the difference between the other two. But we're going to go back over to Photopea and take a look at the puppy here. In the difference of this, we're going to take a look and see what happens when we do the RemoveBG. Yes, we have to watch an ad again.
Your child?
Sorry for the noise. But a 30-second ad is worth it when you can get done and eliminate out backgrounds that you need. Five more seconds. So again, this does well of recognizing the overall area, but I can see that there's little areas that aren't perfect. And what we're going to do is go up to Select at the top of navigation. And we're going to actually look to refine these edges. Refining these edges is cleaning up some areas around the fur. With a refined edge tool, it is not perfect and it is slightly different than Photoshop. And realistically not the most efficient. So we're going to clear this out. I'm going to exit out of the refined edge tool. But if I do take a look at this overall image, where it's different in Photoshop is that if I have it in Photoshop, let me pull it up. I go File, Open, and choose out the puppy image. If I wanted to select out the subject, yes, I can do subject select. Does a good job overall, but it's not perfect. What it does is make too sharp or too harsh of a separation on the background. If I were to put a background color on this thing, as an example, just so you can see it. You see that the edges of the puppy are very sharp. It doesn't blend in well with the background. And the difference, if I go and look to do the process again as a full image, ignore as I go a little bit more complicated. But if I go to select and subject, when we get the selection originally around the subject, we actually want to go through a process of selecting and cleaning up the areas. So I would go to select the mask. It would mask out the area, show me based on where I'm at, and I can use the refine edge tool to clean up the hairs so they look more natural and softens up the overall image. I go around the little fine hairs, adding them into the selection around his ears, and it does a good job overall. Where it gets a little bit complicated is when then we get into the bottom or the blend of the background. So I would have to go into a smaller selection just to make sure that the hairs are a little bit more fine and soften up around the paws and around the subject overall. But now that I've kind of gone through this, use this little area. It does a better job of recognizing the edges. And now when I do the layer mask and see the difference, you see how soft the puppy looks in comparison. Where if I'm looking at the original, it's very sharp and harsh. We get the little hairs of the ear cut off, but this version allows us to see the fine details on it. But this is where Photopea RemoveBG do very well overall. So if I wanted to download this and see how it works, I can see a sample, go insert, image, upload, and choose out the new puppy image. So looking at it, it does very well overall. It's not perfect, but it is actually probably better than Photoshop itself when you start out with the initial selection. So just understand that this refining edges doesn't really apply to what the tools that we use, but now I can go through each of these images understanding how PNGs work. And the tools of Photopea and RemoveBG are great resources to give you free versions of Photoshop. So I hope you can take something away from this and get you more comfortable with the tools of Photopea and Photoshop, and RemoveBG. Have a good day.